every one of the speakers to come here in particular. And in particular today, Joe has been spending a lot of time, and he should be working on his exams and things like that. Dealing with the bureaucracy of ANU, which is not a pleasant thing to do. Also, some of you may be aware there's been a little bit of controversy around here lately about seminars involving Malaysia. I just wanted to say that on behalf of the Political and Social Change, which I'm a member of, that Political and Social Change and ANU support academic study on Malaysia from all perspectives. So from the government perspective and the opposition perspective. And I would note that in terms of the government perspective, we've actually had visits here by Deputy Prime Minister Mahidin and the former Deputy Minister for Higher Education, Saifuddin, in very recent years. So we are happy to cater for all sides in terms of academic debate. At the same time, we also support full involvement by all participants in their seminar in academic debate. A very warm welcome to our two speakers. It's very good of you to come to cold Canberra at this time of the year. A lot of people try and avoid it. Dr. Jeffrey Kitingan and Mr. Darell Leiking, both are very distinguished members of politics in Sabah. And I'd just like to mention briefly that Sabah is often not given the prominence that it deserves in Malaysian politics. Indeed, somebody has written several dozen articles and book and so on Malaysia. I'm also guilty of that. There's only one article that I've written specifically on Sabah, and that was quite a few years ago. But indeed, in recent years, recent months and so on, Sabah has been right at the centre of many critical events in Malaysian politics. There was, of course, as we mentioned in the promo, the invasion by a group from the Philippines in Sabah. There's also been the Royal Commission investigation into illegals in Sabah, which we're still waiting for a report on. But that has been a highly controversial matter. And then, of course, Sabah has been, because of its large Christian population, has also been very much at the centre of developments recently, where we've seen much greater emphasis on Islamic matters in Malaysia, and in particular, of course, just 2 days ago, the recent court decision on not allowing the use of Allah by non-Muslims. And indeed, Dr. Kitingan has already been quoted in the Malaysian press with his views on that particular issue. So, without any further ado, the speakers will each present between 20 minutes and 30 minutes, and then there will be time for question and answers after. So, Dr. Kitingan, if you'd like to come first.
Still morning, and thank you for being here. Darell and I are happy to be with you this morning. I'm familiar with Australia, Western Australia. It's a little bit windy and cold here for me because it's winter. But anyway, I was in Melbourne yesterday, and when I gave a talk there, Malaysian consular assured me there will be no arrest. Don't worry, we can have an open intellectual discussion. So I was very happy to hear that. And being in Canberra here, the national capital, I suppose the High Commission also be interested in what we are going to say. Anyway, I will talk about Malaysia at a crossroad, and in order to understand about Malaysia in terms of the relationship with the Bondu states and why secession, separation today, you need to understand why Malaysia was formed, how Malaysia journeyed over the last 51 years, and what is it right now. So I'll begin by mentioning about the Malaysia Agreement, which was signed in 1963, July 9, 1963. And the signatories to the agreement were Sarawak, North Borneo, Sabah. If I say Sabah, it means North Borneo. Malaya, meaning the Federation of Malaya, Singapore, and United Kingdom. Okay, when Malaysia was proposed, it was actually the idea of Britain, the idea of Malaya. Tengku Abdul Rahman was the one who operationalized the idea. And the objective originally basically is to solve the Singapore problem. What was the Singapore problem? It was related to communism and security. And there was this proposal to merge Singapore with Malaya in order to prevent communism to spread into Malaya. They have to save Singapore first. They have to save equally. But if you merge Singapore with Malaya, then there is this political power equation problem, because the population of Singapore was basically Chinese, the population of Malaya was basically Malay, and they did not want to have this power shift equation, shifting in another direction. So in order to solve that, they look at the Borneo territories, which were about to be decolonized at the time. And this is because they believe that the population of the Borneo territories, including Brunei, basically Malays. Well, what happened? What was the response of the Borneo territories? Basically, it was negative. They did not want to accept the Malaysia proposal, basically because they were on the road to decolonization. They wanted independence first. It's not that they reject Malaysia outright, but they wanted independence first. But what happened? This idea was because the Britain and Malaya basically had already made up their mind. Even before approaching the Borneo territories, they have already made up their mind to proceed with Malaysia. And this is proven by the fact that in paragraph 6 and 7 of the Intergovernmental Committee report, it states the Legislative Council of the Borneo Territory of North Borneo passed this resolution. Be it resolved that this council do welcome the decision in principle of British and Malayan government. The British and Malayan government made a decision. They were passive participants. So they accepted this decision to form Malaysia in principle, provided that the terms of participation and the constitutional arrangement will safeguard the special interests of North Borneo, and they authorized the council to proceed. Now, so the acceptance of Malaysia at the time was conditional. But in between accepting the formation of Malaysia, there was actually an uprising. Uprising in Brunei, uprising in Limbang, and there were a very serious uprising. The uprising was actually they were instigated by the authorities in order to have reasons to quell the leaders of this uprising. In other words, they were arrested. And they were arrested under the guise that these leaders of the uprising are communists. They were arrested under the Internal Security Act. Before that, they have sent a memorandum to the United Nations. Who sent this memorandum is Brunei, signed by Azhari, and in Sabah signed by J.S. Sundam, and in Sarawak by Hihui. They sent a memorandum to the United Nations seeking an audience so that they can present why they reject Malaysia. They wanted independence first. They said there is no referendum, there is no decolonization. So these are the reasons why they forwarded a memorandum to the United Nations indicating that Malaysia's proposal at the beginning was rejected. But what changed their mind later on? See, these are actually demonstrations against the Malaysia proposal. You must remember that the Global Commission did a survey of about 4,000 people. And they said about 1/3 of these people surveyed wanted Malaysia, another wanted independence first, another wanted conditions. So, but they were only 4,000 compared to what happened. There were protests, people gathering together, more than 10,000 people in Lima. So compare that to the people that they surveyed, obviously there were no people against. But nevertheless, eventually Malaysia was accepted. Why? Well, before I talk about why, let's talk about a concern. Why did they reject? Basically, they were not ready politically. Sarawak needed 10 years to be politically mature. Sabah, another 20 years. So they were not ready politically. Secondly, there was fear that Malaysia would be a project of a takeover. They would take over from the Britain and they would continue to be communists. And they would be denied of their own self-determination. They would not be making their own decision, but others would make decisions for them. And so on, specifically they were concerned about security. In fact, it was security that convinced them to agree to be part of Malaysia, other than what I will mention later on, the safeguards. Why security? Well, they were actually scaring Sabah and Sarawak that if you don't participate in this program, the communists will swallow you up, Indonesia will take you over you, or the Philippines will take over. So these were the fears created in their minds. They were also fearful that when Sabah Sarawak participate in forming Malaysia, they would actually become the 12th state, 13th state of Malaya. They would lose control of their own political franchise, finance, and so on. And eventually they were afraid that there would be no compliance even if there was an agreement. These were the fears. But in spite of this, eventually they agreed because okay. Why did they change their mind? When they have rejected, they were afraid of so many things. What changed their mind? Well, number one is Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore. He was very persuasive. It was Singapore's problem, remember, that they wanted to solve, so I suppose Singapore must have this in order to solve his problem. Thanks. Secondly, the safeguard, the conditions, the 20-point condition, the 18-point conditions were essentially accepted and incorporated into the Intergovernmental Committee report. And so their mind were at peace. They said, well, why not? We have autonomy anyway. We control our own funding. There is no official religion. They control land. Political franchise belong to them. We have our own ministry. We govern ourselves. So these were able to persuade them. But in the beginning, they say 20 points will be honored. That was the promise. But today, it's in the dustbin. Next. In 1963, they said it was we're going to join together as partners and everything will be all right. But today is a different story. Now, security assurance was also given. They gave us assurance that when Malaysia comes about, there will be security. Is there security today? From the same people that they told us, Indonesia will come and swallow you up, the Philippines will do the same thing. Now, all of these people are in Sabah. They are there. They are ISIS. And I'll talk about that more later. But this was breached. Even the Tunku Abdul Rahman made so many assurances. And this, of course, gave us peace of mind and we accepted. He even said that it was impossible to colonize the territories because we are combining as equal partners. And there will be no imposition of Islam. He even gave us this assurance that important aspect of the Malaysia ideal is that it will enable the Borneo territories to transform their present colonial status to self-government for themselves and absolute independence simultaneously. If you really think about it, how can absolute independence be possible when you are combining in the federation? They cannot be absolute, right? Still, we believe what he said. And he actually said the granting of self-government would enable the Borneo territories to stand as equal partners with Malaya, Sarawak, and Singapore. But 51 years later, many things happened. We found ourselves, especially in 1970, after Singapore left, we became the 12th state, the 13th state, exactly what was feared at the beginning. And today, we are actually considered one of the states under Malaya, because Malaya and Malaysia is the same. Now from here on, I'll just stop because it will be faster than just okay, the 51 years of political manipulation. They downgraded, they changed the constitution in 1976. Downgraded Sabah from a Negara. Negara means nation, to become a negeri. State constitution, and then they changed the federal constitution from its original form and become just one of the states. In other words, we lost our own long houses and we become just a room in the long house of Malaya. Just a room. We become just like Burmese, the man. And you know, Perlis, Penang, and Kedah combined together, these three states in Semenanjung can be put inside my parliamentary constituency. And still, there are rooms available. So you can see that the states in Semenanjung are actually very, very small. But you can also see the comparison in terms of service, how we are left behind, because in Kitingan there is only one parliamentary seat and 3 state seats, but combined together, the 3 states, you have about 28 parliamentary seats. So if you give 1 million for each parliament, you can see the comparison how far the allocation is favoring their side. Now, after that, 1976, there was supposed to be a review of the Malaysian agreement after 10 years, I mean 1973. But they were so engrossed in trying to take over Sabah's oil gas resources that they forgot all about it. And 1976, 1975, they enacted the Petroleum Development Act. And 1976, from 74, 75, 76, they tried to take over the oil from Sabah and Sarawak, and they could not deal with it easily. But in 1976, they were asked to come to Labuan to sign a petroleum surrender agreement. 6th of June 1976. But our leaders were not convinced, they did not agree, because in this agreement, they want us to surrender the oil resources, but in return, they only give us 5% cash payment. 5%, not even royalty. And in the same agreement, they want us to agree to waive our rights to royalty. So in June 6, 1976, it was not signed because the Chief Minister, Donald Stephen, wanted to time to think about it. And on the way home, the whole plane crashed. Boom. And we don't know until today, the report has not been released because the Malaysian authorities do not want the report to be released because of the tragedy. We are not saying anything, but according to Tunku Razali. The last minute, he was already on the plane. He was seated with a seatbelt, and he was asked by another person to go to another plane. And of course, then he was safe. And the Chief Minister of Sarawak also moved to another plane. And the Deputy Chief Minister, then Haris Saleh, also moved to that other plane. In fact, he was the one who invited him. And all those who signed the agreement later were on the other plane. What happened, we don't know. But this was a tragedy of a big magnitude. And the irony is 8 days after the tragedy, they came back asking the state government to sign the surrender agreement. So Haris Saleh by then became the Chief Minister, and he signed it. My brother was the witness, unfortunately. But we must remember that they were still in mourning at that time. The mourning, their mind probably was not set, not calm. And according to Harris, there was pressure for him to sign. And it was signed on the 14th of June 1976. So they took over the oil that time under very unusual circumstances, unconstitutionally, because land and natural resources belong to the state under the constitution and also under the state list. So you know, if you are lawyers, that the state cannot pass legislation on federal list and vice versa, only on concurrent list. And in this case, the federal government passed legislation affecting issues under the state list, which is land and natural resources. So it was unconstitutional. Now, having taken the oil resources, they now begin to change the political power equation. At the beginning of Malaysia, the formula was like this. Semenanjung or Malaya had 65% of the parliamentary seats, less than 2/3. Whereas the other portion are distributed among the other partners, Singapore, Sarawak, and Brunei, and Sabah. Okay? Well, what happened over the years, in this way, if Malaya wanted to change the federal constitution affecting the rights of Sabah and Sarawak, they would not be able to do so without the support of Sabah and Sarawak. This is the protection. What happens over the years, this configuration was changed to the present moment, whereby Malaya or Semenanjung now controls 75% of the seats. So even if Sabah and Sarawak combine together, 25%, they won't be able to block any constitutional amendment because all the seats are in Semenanjung. So this is the situation now, because even the one has been taken over, and so it becomes 75%. And today we are really a minority. We have been taken over, right? So this was one of the manipulation. The other thing is the population restructuring, so-called through the Project IC, and even before that. Now, originally we had a population structure like this. The native population, the